This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
All of us are looking for a life of meaning and significance. A life that makes a difference in the world. A life that truly matters. We believe this is found through the right people, platform, and purpose. We call this movement 3. It starts with giving people greater health through the power of our proactive wellness products. 3's innovative formulas deliver demonstrable results by maximizing bioavailability and cellular absorption, ensuring people everywhere can enjoy the nutrition they need to operate at their best. Building on our foundation of people-focused products, we provide a platform for unparalleled entrepreneurship and personal growth. 3 is there beside you every step of your journey towards building a business and a better life. Finally, we know that a sense of real purpose, the kind that moves hearts, minds, and mountains, comes through serving and elevating others. This philosophy is reflected in our caring community, which bring hope and life-saving help to people around the world. It's time to redefine what's possible and activate your full potential. It's time to live a life of purpose. It's time for 3.
Hey, thanks for joining me once again as we embark on episode number 145 of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment, the show that dives deep into the inner workings and realities of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening. Now, before we head off to meet our guest, I'd like you to check out my new ebook, The Jogger to Runner book, which you can now get a copy of for only $1.99. I may be a law of attraction and spiritual life coach, but I've also run 78 full marathons, and I'm a running coach. So I'm a proponent of helping others enhance their health and well-being and to get out there and get running for a lifetime. Just scan the QR code you see right here on the screen or click the link below in the show notes to get your ebook copy of the Jogger to Runner book for only $1.99. All right, let's head off and meet our guest. And our guest is Gabrielle Pimstone. She worked in a corporate psychology career for 27 years, but a chance podcast encounter altered the course of her life. Podcasts will do that, you know. She is now an energy coach, helping those feeling burned out and stuck. Gabrielle is on a mission to normalize energy healing and spirituality. Her personal story is a journey of resilience and reinvention, highlighting 6 defining moments. She offers inspiration and practical tips to individuals to break free from stagnation and fear, and Lord knows so many of us need that. And her central message is that it's never too late to make meaningful life change. So with that, very cool. Gabrielle, welcome to the show, all the way from Australia, where it's a lot warmer than where I'm at.
Hello, Carl, and hi to your guests. It's wonderful to be here. It is a lot warmer, but it's really humid, so I could do with a little bit of snow at the moment. But It's really awesome to be here, and I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Well, this is great. Gabrielle has been so sweet in coming on the show, but she's got a great story. You are now known as an energy coach, but your road to becoming one was a bit unexpected. You had a long career as a psychologist in the corporate world, but you got burned out on it. What happened?
Well, corporate will do that to a lot of people. Actually, I was having lunch with a whole lot of women friends a couple of weeks ago. They were all still in the corporate world. I have left the corporate world, and all of them were talking about feeling burnt out, living like their life with dread, anxiety, performance anxiety. There's a not good enough script in the corporate. You've always got to do better, and it actually broke me. And it was 2020. Talk about that podcast. Podcasts absolutely have the capacity to change one's life. I woke up on a Sunday morning. It was the 9th of August, 2020, and I was in a senior leadership role in a bank. And I woke up with this terrible pit in my stomach. And that wasn't unfamiliar, but it was really bad that day. And I realized I was feeling that way because the next day was Monday. I actually had to go to work. I took myself off for a walk, listened to an incredible podcast. It was random. It was a woman being interviewed who, for other reasons, was living her life in a perpetual cycle of anxiety. And she spoke about always waiting for the other shoe to fall. That was her kind of byline. And when she said that, it just landed for me. I realized that's been me ever since I was a young kid, 9 years old. And it's just been increasing over the course of my life. And so that was one reason that catalyzed me into changing gears. The other reason, which I feel comfortable sharing on your podcast, but not all others, is that I'd started to channel. I would wake up a couple of mornings a week, and I would wake up to sound bites. And mostly they were coming from inside my head. There was one occasion where it came from the bottom of my bed, and I got curious about what that all meant. So I guess the confluence of those two things moved me onto a different path.
Wow, that's really interesting. Of course, most of my viewers and listeners know I've had many, many, many channels on here, and it is really, really something that is so cool. Now, going back to you heard this podcast. Do you remember exactly what podcast it was?
It was it was one of Oprah's a podcast, but it was a long time ago, and I can't remember. She's got a number of podcast channels, and I can't remember which one it was, but she was the interviewer.
Oh, so it was one of the guests that was talking that. Oh, okay. Do you know who the guest was?
No, she was just an ordinary citizen. Her daughter, she was talking about her daughter who'd been in a car accident like 10 years before. And at the time, it was a terrible accident. Her daughter had to learn to walk again. It was quite intense. Now, a couple of years, 10 years or so later, her daughter was married, expecting her first child, and the woman couldn't enjoy the moment. So the whole podcast was around that narrative. Like, even when life was going well, she was trapped in this invisible prison of anxiety, dread, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that was my story.
And the reason I asked it, I was just thinking, wouldn't it be cool if you're able to contact that woman and tell her what a beautiful effect it had on your life,
Actually, that's a really good point, and I've never even thought of that. I'm ashamed to say I've never thought of it. I think that's a really great idea. Let me go back and have a look at that and see. I mean, her name was shared. I just can't remember it. Yeah.
Well, the other question I have for you, this transition, how did your family, friends, and co-workers react to your transition from the corporate world to being an energy practitioner?
Well, family, very supportive, funnily enough. Now, I come from a long line of doctors, medical practitioners. My late grandfather, my late father, my brother, and strangely enough, they supported me, and they supported me because they could see the growth that I'd been through. And friends, that's been a bit of a challenge. What's happened, and it often happens when you level up in your spiritual practice, that there are people in your life that drop out because the rules of the game have changed. The dynamic in the relationship shifts, and it's difficult to have the conversation. So that's been, in all honesty, a little bit more tricky. In terms of colleagues, actually a lot of my clients have been past colleagues of mine from the corporate world, suffering from burnout, wanting to leave, but not, just needing that extra nudge, not being able to make the decision with clarity. You're living with anxiety. So actually a huge part of my practice has been through corporate clients, which is really interesting and unexpected.
Yeah, I think that's true too. Even in my own life, I mean, when you have a transition like that, fairly radical from what you were doing, there's just going to be people who fall away or out of your life, and
Yeah.
hopefully it's in a pleasant manner, but they're just not part of your game or your life plan at that moment, and
No, they're not. Yeah.
you can be sad, but you can also be grateful because you're on a new, loving, beautiful path.
Exactly, Carl. And I mean, that is a really good reframe. Look, it is sad because all of this journey, anytime you go through a major transformation in life, there's a grieving process. So even if it were just changing careers, there would be some loss around that, because what you need to do is let go of the old to bring in the new. And it's an identity change. Compound that with friendships changing, it can be really tricky. So that is a kind of a flag to I'm just flagging that for any of your guests or listeners who are considering a transition, that's part of the course. Like, be prepared to sit in grief and loss and to work your way through that.
Yeah. Yeah, those are very wise words right there. So, one thing I would like to know, you're known as an energy coach, as I mentioned, and I like how your website describes what you do as Reiki on turbocharge. I love that. What exactly does an energy coach do?
Well, what I teach people to do actually is to master their energy. That's the essence of it, because energy runs the show. We can't see it, but it's this invisible life force, and it can either be an invisible accelerant or an invisible handbrake. You know that through the law of attraction and the work that you do. So what I teach people is how to master their energy, and there are three components to it. I teach them, first one is how to understand your energy, how to tune in and read your energy, and knowing the difference between whether it is heavy or light. And if it's heavy, then I move into the next one, which is how do you manage your energy. And all of that is all about practicing good energy hygiene, preferably proactively. But I also teach people, if they're finding themselves in an energetic slump, how do you heal your energy blocks? I teach people how to read their chakras, and also how to interrupt energy dips. And then the third component of what I work with is how to optimize your energy. And I work with advanced sacred geometry. And what I do is we've all got latent gifts and potential that's, it's just sitting there, it's dormant. And I have the tools to actually activate that. And it's a really incredible practice, because what it does is it takes your energy and it elevates it by tapping into your dormant potential and unleashing that. I do that in a number of ways. I can do that from a manifestation perspective, helping to elevate the energetic frequency. Sometimes people come to me, they want to activate their spiritual gifts. I've got the tools to do that. So that's the optimization. So they're those three things. I'm always teaching people how to understand, manage, and optimize their energy.
I like that term, energetic slump. And unfortunately, the vast majority of the world is in an energy slump. And,
You're right.
well, I'm curious too. What led you to study psychology in the first place, and does it help with what you're now doing as a coach?
Yes, very much so. It's such a great question. Ever since I was a young kid, I've always described myself as a self-help junkie with a little bit of a spiritual bent. Like, I was always fascinated by my dreams as a child. I used to document my dreams. I've been working with my dreams for, 40 years now. I would wake up. I still remember the first really impactful dream that I had. And I remember sitting on my windowsill and journaling. I learned to journal at a young age, self-reflection, got into therapy at a young age. So I've always been a self-help junkie. And, it's just, and then it became, what if I can, when I turned 18, time to go to university, what if I can make a career out of this? And I just loved it. And I still love it. The thing that made me leave corporate was because of the blocks in corporate to actually making impact, to affecting change, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of toxic politics. So what I have actually done is I have brought a whole lot of those skill sets into my coaching work now. And the way that I describe it is it's almost like a fusion of East meets West, because what I'm doing is I am helping people who've got contemporary psychological challenges, and I'm helping to fix it in a spiritual framework. So definitely I've brought it through into this new business, this new practice.
So that's interesting. You call yourself an energy junkie. I have many colleagues who call themselves, I love this term, a spiritual gangster.
I love that as well. Absolutely.
I need to get one of those T-shirts. But so when you're in this phase, when you're still in the corporate world as this team lead and all this, and you're burned out, it's not like you just all of a sudden, okay, I'm quitting. I know I'll become an energy healer and energy master, but you had been studying that stuff all along, even while you're in the corporate world.
Yes. And I took 18 months while I was still studying, while I was still in the corporate world, to accredit as an energy practitioner. And I worked with somebody in the States, 18 months, level 3 levels. And I didn't just, give up the comfort of corporate immediately. There was a transition into my new persona. And that also helped me manage the stress and the anxiety of such a big change and such a big identity change.
Wow, yeah, too, myself, I went through a year-long law of attraction life course certification. So well worth it. It changed my life too.
It really does. And the other thing is, like, when you reskilling, and I mean, I did that north of 50 years old, which is not really easy, but it's important to do that in a container and to have a community and a tribe that can support you through it. So 18 months with 60 people who we really went through a journey together. There was another soft landing there, because as I was working through really deep blocks, I had a supportive group of people who knew what I was going through and who could support me through it, and I could support them through it. So that's also a really important piece of the puzzle when you're making such a big shift.
And I will tell you this, Gabrielle, as you continue doing this, you're going to experience what I have. I actually have, my tribe is a global community. All of these people I've had on my show and done workshops with and all that, they are my support team. Locally where I live, most of my personal friends are not into anything that I do, and I know my viewers and listeners have heard me say this before. I'll be talking to them about spirituality and their eyes just glaze over. And then I say, oh, did you see the football game last night? Which is fine.
Exactly.
I love sports. So.
I know. I mean, I have to share this because one of my brothers, the doctor, who has been incredibly supportive of me in this journey, years ago, if somebody said, somebody once asked, what does your sister do? And he said, oh, she works in corporates and she wears kaftans and plays tambourines in corporates. And it was kind of really tongue in cheek, but that's how, this stuff can be viewed as really woo-woo. Even psychology can be viewed as that. And you're right, eyes do glaze over. And it's just, you've got to really back yourself, don't you?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. But, the other thing I'm curious about, I read that you are on a mission to normalize energy healing and spirituality. How so?
Well, I was on a mission. I need to take that out of my profile because I wrote that when it was still really new. And now I've come to understand that those who are ready will be drawn to this. Mm-hmm. But there is some truth in that, because the world of spirituality is, there are all types that practice and teach spirituality, and many of them can't find it difficult to translate what they're doing for their clients. I remember going to a number of psychics and, before I learned all about this, and spiritual teachers, and actually not really knowing what they were doing, not really understanding it. And I think there is some value in being able to translate really lofty, out there concepts into practical how-tos. If you're going to make a living out of this, you want to help people, they've got to walk away with something that they can do a little bit differently. And so I feel it's less of a mission now, but I still feel a responsibility to translate what I'm doing for my audience, for my clients, so that they can get the most out of the experience. They don't leave with more questions. They feel like they've got more answers. And that's part of how I work.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I'm sure your clients appreciate that. They need that clarity.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned this in your introduction here. What are these 6 defining moments in your life?
Oh, yeah, that was in my journey to becoming a spiritual, an energy practitioner. Well, the one defining moment was the awakening. We all need that catalyst, and I've already spoken about that, the moment that prompted me to break free from 27 years of corporate life and ongoing stress. So that I talk about what catalyzed me, and it was that podcast, but it was also that I'd started to channel. The second part of the story is talking about breaking the chains, which is really discussing the challenges and the fears that I faced when I decided to leave the safety of what was familiar to me. And, you spoke earlier, you asked me whether I experienced any judgment from people in my world. Actually, my biggest challenge was my own self-judgment and shame. I actually couldn't say for a while that I'm an energy healer. It just couldn't come out my mouth. So we go through fear and shame and anxiety and a whole lot of regret. There's an emotional journey, and I talk through that, and I'm happy to share that with your guests as well. The third part of my journey was really about, okay, I've made the decision. How do I navigate the unknown? How do I navigate this transition, both practically and emotionally? And what was and this is where I get quite pragmatic, what were some of the practical and emotional strategies that I put in place to make the journey a little bit easier? Then I talk a little bit about, a healthier you. That's the next segment, which is really how energy mastery transformed my life and my well-being, with a particular focus on anxiety. And I talk about practical tips for incorporating energy techniques into your daily life. Then the fifth part of the story is around rediscovering my purpose. I thought I had a purpose, but I changed it. I've recently changed my purpose, and I talk about why living my purpose is so essential, and how it's helped me navigate through the stress of the unknown. And then the sixth part is really about the journey, the forward journey, and I'm happy to share some exciting, plans and products and services for the future. So those are the 6 key elements of it.
Wow, awesome. Yeah, it's nice that you have that mapped out too. So,
Yeah.
one of the first things you learn when you study the law of attraction, I know that this was true for me, is that everything is energy. Everything is energy, yet so many people simply don't get that, or they refuse to believe it. How can you, as an energy coach, overcome this?
Well, this is where kind of my psychology helps, because most people, and I absolutely agree with you, energy, like my slogan is energy runs the show, that everything has got an energetic frequency. So people typically can understand that you experience blocks, like mindset blocks, your thoughts, the stories you tell yourself, the emotions you've experienced, the decisions you make, the actions you take, the habits you have. All of those things can trip you up, right? Most people understand that. But it's not the actual belief itself that's tripping you up. It's everything has got an energetic frequency. So you can sit in therapy, which I did for a long time, and you can talk about, how do I shift my belief? How do I change my behavior? It's important to know what's tripping you up, but actually the blocks that occur have an energetic frequency. And if you can find the energetic inception point, which is how I work, and release that, it speeds things up so incredibly that change becomes much faster. Manifestation becomes much faster. So, for example, in a context of manifestation, somebody might have a common block around making money. And you can talk about that. You can think your way into a different way, a different relationship with money. But actually, there's an energetic frequency around that block. And going in, finding it, and releasing the energetic inception point changes everything. That's why I'm so passionate about energy work. And so it's the bringing together of, know your beliefs, know what's tripping you up, with techniques to release them much faster. That makes it really powerful.
Yeah, that's so true. It's great. You have to find those energy blocks, and I believe that's different for every person. Myself, sometimes I feel like a block of granite, and there's like a chisel and a hammer. Where's that energy block? After
Yeah.
year after year, and I don't know. I must have a hard head, when I fell down when I was a kid or something. But it is different. So it's a good thing we have people like you to help us out there. And
Yeah.
speaking of that, what are some of the biggest factors that you encounter that keeps people chained to their mundane, unfulfilling life? Is it fear or
Totally.
yeah?
Yeah. It's fear. It's actually all about fear. And so what people fear the most is change to identity, big one. Change to relationships. And when you're moving through change, you are temporarily in competence, and that elicits a whole lot of fear. So those, fear can come, from change to identity, all those sorts of things, change in relationships and group membership. Those are the things that stop us, that keep us in the status quo and unable to move forward. So the first step in the process is to work with that block, release it, and help people make the decision, take the first step. That's always the hardest. Yeah.
I think you probably find this as a coach when you're working with a person. I know I do when I'm doing a life coaching situation, is most people feel unworthy of having their greatest dreams and goals. And so if there's somebody, another person like you in corporate world, and they hate their job and they hate their life, but they're afraid to let go of that contentedness and all that. And oh, but I got
Yeah.
so money, but it's there. Most people are afraid to go after their greatest dreams and aspirations, and but people that have got to learn that they are worthy of having that.
Absolutely. I can't remember. I think there's a quote by Nelson Mandela. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's something like the greatest thing that we fear in ourselves is our power to be happy, our power to feel joy. That is really so true what you're saying. But at the same time, I think we all have an innate drive to be and to become the best versions of ourselves. I think that's also human nature. No one, well, very few people want to show up in the worst version of themselves. We've got this innate desire to grow, to regenerate, and to grow into the best version of ourselves. And so you've got to harness that will. You've got to harness that desire as well. And it's not that difficult. There's a real thrill in learning about yourself, in new insights, in working through stuff, and in activating, your potential, your passion. Most people want that. So that's another part of my role, is to help people find the will to change. It's there.
Well, and there's another quote similar to that Nelson Mandela one. And gosh, I wish I had it in front of me because I'm going to have
Yeah.
to paraphrase it. Some A Course in Miracles teacher, Marianne Williamson, who is now a candidate for the president of the United States. And one of her most famous quotes, yeah, she is. She's a serious candidate. But anyway, something like, you're afraid to, who are you to be not grab onto your magnificence, your beauty, your, and all that. You're worth it. I'm just slaughtering that quote, but it's very similar to that. So
Actually, I think Nelson Mandela pinched that. I think that Marianne Williams was the originator. It's the same quote. We're thinking about the same thing, and I think we both butchered it, but it's the same thing. Yeah,
yeah, okay. So it sounded familiar. That's what it was. Um,
yeah.
so how does a person discover their main purpose in life? Is it all trial and error, or do some people just come into life knowing their purpose? I know me. I I'm still waiting to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Some people do. I did actually. I came into life, and my mother will tell you this. I was an activist from like the age of 5, and yeah, giving a voice to the voiceless. And a lot of people, I can't think off the top of my head, but people like the late Steve Jobs, people who've transformed the world in many ways. If you go back into their story, they have found they found their purpose really early, and I get that. But for a lot of people, like life happens, and we don't go down that route, and we don't understand it, and they might need sometimes there's a catalyst that happens in their life that helps them understand their why. So they may have like a crisis or a catastrophe, and that, I'm giving you just a fictitious example, that might make them realize that it is their purpose to, I don't know, be a voice for the voiceless, or to help people, or and that can steer them. So sometimes crises do that. But it's interesting is, funnily enough, in the corporate world, it's become in vogue to, in our leadership journeys, to find your purpose, because the whole notion of authenticity has become authentic leadership is it's a big topic. And so more and more corporates are instilling programs, and this is what I used to lead, programs for leaders to find and activate their purpose. And so I actually think, and so it's coming from different angles, but a lot of us, we are born with it. We either turn it on or turn it off. And, if we haven't turned it on, life will turn it on for you. You'll have an experience that'll open the door to you finding your why.
Well, all I can say is about those corporations where they're actually encouraging employees to find their purpose in life. All I have to say is it's about freaking time.
It's about in time.
And I'll tell you what, I mean, still the vast majority of the corporations in the world, the bottom line is the bottom line. What are we bringing in for money, and then screw everything else. So, but that is encouraging to hear that. So
yeah, well, I think they're doing it because like the demographic is changing. So, for example, in banks, which is where I used to work, like a lot of their customers are like millennials, younger people, and they have a different expectation of organizations that they transact with. They actually expect organizations to have a social conscience, to have a reason for being that is a frame of reference that's more than money. So actually the catalyst is coming from the customer, the new customer, the younger people, wanting more than just, organizations that make money. They've got to actually stand for something bigger than themselves. But in the context of like personal mastery and personal development, and having a purpose really is such an antidote to anxiety and depression. And that's what's been my experience, that having something, that a cause that is bigger than myself, takes me out of myself, and has really helped me when it comes to depression and anxiety in my own life. And Yeah, it's just, I'm really passionate about the topic of purpose.
Well, perhaps we could promote the worldwide media to have a consciousness and a purpose instead of what they feed us. So.
I know, I know. I mean, we recently had, not so recently, but 5 years ago in Australia, all those terrible bushfires. I don't know if you were aware of them, but like Sydney was encircled, and we just took to the streets, and we, you know, as a result of the progress, the government at the time, quite conservative, climate denialists, and in Australia, climate change is upon us. And yeah, we took to the streets, and we landed up in the next election, he was out. So yeah, people are, if you've got a cell phone and a social media account, you've got a lot of power. And I think corporates have cottoned onto that. And now I think world leaders need to cotton onto that, don't they?
You activist, you.
I am. I'm a serious activist. I really am. Yeah.
Hey,
it used to be, yeah.
You're talking to a guy that grew up in the hippie era during the anti-war movement against Vietnam. So look out. But that's not my purpose right now. But I just for a moment, and by the way, just to remind viewers and listeners, we're talking to Gabrielle Pimstone from Australia, an energy worker, energy healer. This is just awesome. I just want to go back and touch briefly on, we had talked earlier about energy blocks, but what exactly is an energy block, and what are some of the reasons they occur?
Yeah. So I'll talk about the reasons first, and then I'll talk about what they are. So energy blocks can come from experiences, traumas in our life, often in childhood. That's where the psychology comes in as well. They can also happen where in utero, like when you're in your mother's womb, if she has a stressful experience, that energy is passed on to you. They can happen, they can be passed down from generation to generation. So your grandparents, your parents, you inherit blocks from them, and they can also be karmic, and so that's where they come from. And what happens is we'll experience something, or one of our ancestors or parents will experience something. And what happens is that because that event has an energetic stamp, it has an energetic frequency, if you don't resolve and work through it and transmute the energy, it remains stuck. It gets stuck in your energetic body, and it doesn't get transmuted. So it sits as a low vibrational energy in somewhere in your energetic body. Usually starts in the auric field, and what happens is over time, as things reinforce the block, you have more experiences, it compounds and compounds, and then finally it becomes this big fat energy block in one of your chakras. And it's basically, so and common energy blocks are things like, and you've got an energy block if you are experiencing patterns in your life. So if you've got a repetitive thing or issue that you can't resolve, there's a block around that, an energetic block around that. So that could be in relationships, that could be with regards to money, that could be with regards to abundance and manifestation. You could have blocks to joy. It could be anything. I work with people who procrastinate a lot. There's an energetic block that is around fear and making decisions. It can be absolutely anything. But the point is that they're invisible. And if we don't work through them, they compound over time until they become this, like a giant handbrake that we don't know why we can't get out of this cycle and this pattern. And they stop us manifesting, they stop us moving forward in our lives. And it's the invisible nature of them that makes it so difficult to move through them.
Well, it's interesting. I actually am a facilitator, an administrator of a big Power of 8 healing group on Facebook. And we do individual healing sessions. This Power of 8 was created by Lynn McTaggart, she's one of the greatest researchers in metaphysics and a journalist and everything. And where 8 or more people come together and focus on healing a person, place, or thing. Actually, just an hour before you and I started talking, I did a healing session with somebody, and we get people from around the world. And one thing I have learned in doing these healing sessions is that sickness is generated, the genesis is in the energy blocks, and we don't realize it. We go to the doctor, well, fix this symptom, but you have to go to the core, to the source of the issue, which is one of these energy blocks. And so thank God there's people like you to help people with this stuff.
100%. We're treading into controversial territory here, and I'm a firm believer in a hybrid approach. Like modern medicine's got its place, energy work's got its place, and the fusion of both of it makes it really powerful. But I remember years ago, before I got into any of this, before I understood or knew about energy blocks, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And thankfully she's fine, but it was a fast-growing cancer. And I remember at the time thinking, I never dared expressing it, but thinking, it doesn't surprise me, because she's lived with so much anxiety and worry her whole life. And I knew somewhere, like I couldn't work it out, but that anxiety and worry had gotten trapped and it had transmuted into a disease. So yeah, I agree with that. And one of the things that I've learned in my teaching is the sacred geometry to heal physical conditions as well. So moving out of the energetic body, but working in organs and releasing disease from the physical body. It's very powerful.
I find that interesting that you work with sacred geometry, because I really didn't know much about it. Still not super cognizant of it. But about 5 or 6 shows ago, I had Gail and Gregory Hogue, who are practitioners of sacred geometry. Their website is phenomenal. And it's interesting because I've become friends with Dr. Joe Vitale, who is one of the stars in the movie The Secret. And I've been a guest on his show, Zero Limits Living TV. And Joe actually wears one of Greg and Gail Hogue's sacred geometry pennants around it because of the healing energy in it. But yeah, that's really an area where there's a lot to it, and it's really cool you're into that.
And that's why I say on my website that how I work is Reiki. Actually, you said it's Reiki on steroids, and then I took it out because that wasn't politically correct, but Reiki turbocharged, because I work with advanced sacred geometry, and it holds the most divine frequency. And different kinds of sacred geometry have different powers of healing. Some can be used, as I said, for physical ailments. Some can be used for total forgiveness. I've got the sacred geometry for total forgiveness. It is intensely powerful. Others can be used to activate spiritual gifts. The list is endless. And that's what differentiates the modality of healing that I do from regular healing. It's more than hands-on healing. Although I am working with the chakras and I'm reading energy that way, I'm bringing in sacred geometry to do the work for me, because it's like an adapter. Think of it as, we are human. We've only got a specific energetic capacity, but there's a whole lot of divine energy that we're trying to pull in and channel to heal other people. Sacred geometry acts as the adapter, and it houses the energy and it does the healing on your behalf. It's super, super powerful.
Well, I'm really going way out there on this one, but also a number of shows ago, 4 or 5, Brad Johnson is a channeler of a galactic being called Ashtar. And Ashtar talks about how the galactics use something called a med bed, where they can put a being, a body in it. And all of their healing stuff has basically sacred geometry symbols on it. And they utilize that to channel energy into healing. And anybody who wants to, they can go back and check out Brad Johnson. It's pretty interesting when he brings Ashtar through, and who is from a different galaxy, all that. So I do ask, would like to find this out. This is always fun to ask. Maybe you didn't have one, but what's the most memorable thing that has happened to you personally when you're doing energy work, either on yourself or another person?
Oh, channeling.
What?
It's channeling. It's absolutely channeling because the most incredible thing to when you is to actually step away, to get your mind out the way, and I've got the sacred geometry. I can actually channel from my higher self. So I'm actually not doing the healing. My higher self is doing the healing. It's absolutely magnificent to be able to stand back and be a participant and watch the healing unfold. I find that pretty wild. So that would be a really a memorable, and that is, I don't do it all the time, but it is a memorable moment every time. It's unbelievable. You're witnessing your higher self doing the healing on your behalf. It's pretty wild.
What was that like the very first time it happened? Did you understand what was going on?
No, and I still don't understand what's going on half the time. Your mind doesn't have to be on board. In fact, it is important that you don't have to know what's going on for the stuff to be incredible. But what it is yeah, it's unbelievable. So it's less about what is sitting back and figuring out what's going on, but sitting back and experiencing the energy running through you and experiencing like you're feeling the techniques, that you're tuning into what's happening, but you don't have to understand it. You just know that something big has taken over. It's magic.
Wow, God bless you. That is just so amazing. Like I said, I've had a lot of channels on this show, and it's always amazing to me. I usually sit there with my mouth hanging open, especially when bring through the being that they're channeling.
What's interesting, I don't channel beings, I channel my higher self.
Hmm. Perfect.
So I have not, I, I'm trying to think. I have had a couple of experiences where I have channeled from the other side, somebody who's passed over. That has happened a couple of times. The one time I didn't know, this was when I was experiencing my channeling, and I woke up and I heard from the bottom of my bed very clearly the word Ben, just the name Ben. And I thought, what is this? Like, I couldn't work out what's going on. And then a couple of weeks later, I was in a weekend workshop, and it was like there were 1,500 of us. You get broken up into small breakout groups, and I got broken out. We're talking about spiritual gifts. And I was too scared to tell them that I channel, but I was the last one there was a small group of like 6 of us in a breakout room, and I was the last one to check in, and I said, oh, I've started to channel. Like, I heard the name Ben a while ago, and there was a woman in the breakout group who said, oh, that's my daughter's late husband. We recently just celebrated the 8th year of his passing. And I said, when was that? And she told me the date. I said, where do you live? And she told me where she lived. It was California. And I went back to my journal and I channeled the word Ben at the exact date and time that they were doing this kind of ceremony to say, yeah.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah, but most of the time it's my higher self, which is less interesting.
We're going to wind up here in a minute or two. I would like to ask this. Do you have any advice to someone who may right now be watching or listening to this show, who's afraid to take that big step forward to their higher purpose and fulfillment in life?
Yeah. I mean, honor your fear, because I think fear that has it can be both an enabler and constraint, and we think of it often as a constraint. But for me personally, I went through huge fear. It was a huge barrier to embrace my spirituality. But honor that, and you can always set the intention, put the parameters around your journey. Set the intention that you only experience as much as you can handle, make it a gentle journey, And once you've set those parameters, it becomes really safe. The thing, and your vibration is your protection. So the higher up you go, the more protected you are. People tend to think, oh, if you delve into this, you're going to encounter negative entities. I haven't, because I've lifted my energetic vibration. And so there's actually nothing to really be fearful about. But manage your journey and put the parameters around you. That would be my piece of advice.
Well, Gabrielle Pimstone from, you may be in Sydney, Australia, but since with technology like Zoom, anybody in the world can work with you. What is your website? You do one-on-one coaching and you do live workshops too?
I don't do live workshops. I do one-on-one and group coaching. So if group coaching is fabulous, I love facilitating, but I think there's a lot of support in having your tribe around you. So when you're in a container with other people, really cool. So individual coaching, group coaching. I also have healing packages. If you don't want to learn how to do it yourself, just come to me for a few healings. If you want to address a particular part of your life, I can do that. So the best way to contact me actually is on social media. It's on Instagram. I'm really responsive to DMs, so reach out.
And what's your website?
My website is Generative Growth, www.generativegrowth.com.au. Good old Aussie website. Yeah. And you can reach out to me there as well. There's a Let's Chat button. Get in touch with me. I get immediate alerts, so feel free to reach out that way.
Well, this has been awesome. So, Gabrielle, you are doing some beautiful work, and I'm so grateful to have you on the show. Thank you for what you do. Keep spreading the light and the love and the energy.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting these kinds of conversations. I actually went onto your podcast, and I'm going to listen to some really interesting conversations you've hosted. Thank you so, so much, Carl.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.